How did Doom once mastermind a silent coup of the Wakandan throne? Dr. Doom's affinity for strategy is on par with some of the best tacticians in all of Marvel, including the likes of Steve Rogers and Nick Fury, and he's used this ability to plan some incredibly complex maneuvers to outwit even some of Marvel's finest heroes. On one occasion, he actually orchestrated a plan to invade Wakanda and usurp the throne from T'Challa, and he did this entirely without having his armies ever suit up for combat. So today, let's analyze exactly what the Doom War was, and how Doom conquered all of Wakanda and T'Challa. During the early days of Wakanda, the founding tribes understood that Wakanda and its power was to be contained strictly within the walls of the Wakandan nation. The vibranium supply and title of the Black Panther were far too precious and powerful to release into the rest of the world, and these roots go back thousands of years in history of the Wakandan people. For centuries, Wakanda was violently isolationist. They would never provoke another nation, but if their borders were ever tested, they retaliated in full force, with no room for debate or exception. And for years, this was the normal state of Wakanda. They put on a mask of complete secrecy, and all they wanted was to fly under the radar in terms of global affairs. This, however, quite notably changed in the modern day, when Wakanda opened its borders to the rest of the world. King T'Challa was a huge driving force in sharing the resources of Wakanda with the world, and inviting more global collaboration in Wakandan efforts. They contributed science and technology to the rest of the world, and offered an economy driven by trade of vibranium products, as well as Wakandan weaponry, which led Wakanda into becoming an economic superpower as well as an unrivaled militaristic power in the Marvel comics. It took a long time for the people of Wakanda to get used to this, however, with some believing that Wakanda should close its borders yet again. The tribe, known as the Deserti, were aggressively conservative and advocated for the complete return to Wakandan's isolationist ways. During the Dark Reign saga, T'Challa was invited by Namor to the clandestine meeting between himself and Norman Osborn, who were formerly a cabal, and it was revealed that they wanted to offer T'Challa a seat on the council. Upon refusing, a fight broke out, and T'Challa was severely beaten to the point where he was now comatose, and the mantle of the Black Panther had to be assumed by Shuri for the rest of the time being. With T'Challa out of the picture, the throne of Wakanda was weakened, and this gave the Deserti the opportunity to amass more power and influence among the Wakandan people when the king was absent. They saw Shuri as a weak target, and they rallied more and more of the Wakandan civilization population to their cause, especially now that they had the actions of the Cabal to fuel their point. They believed that Wakanda needed to close their borders immediately. Their king was beaten within an inch of his life, and Wakanda needed to close its borders for its own safety. To make matters worse, King T'Challa was married to Storm of the X-Men, who was an outsider that the Deserti absolutely hated. The idea that the King of Wakanda could open the borders to the world was one thing, but to invite an outsider into the royal family was unheard of, and absolutely deplorable to many of the Wakandan people. Never before had the Deserti had so much social power over the Wakandan political climate, and things were getting worse. They placed Storm on trial for treason, and began to find themselves in positions of governmental power, amassing near complete control over Wakanda as a full-fledged revolution against the throne. Despite being strict isolationists, however, the leader of the Deserti was a revolutionary by the name of Takan, who was receiving outside intelligence from none other than Victor Von Doom. In fact, it was Doom that figured out how to place Takan in power, and how to expose the weak points of Wakandan's political system to make the most effective silent revolution possible. And it was Doom who orchestrated the beating of T'Challa and the rise of the Deserti. But things were only going to get worse. Now Dr. Doom was at the gates of the Wakandan vault, but he was not done yet. Storm was being held on trial, and maintains that her husband will return and reclaim the throne of Wakanda, as he was actively going for the X-Men to aid him, and Storm pled for the people to be patient. Doom, however, understood that this was an inevitable eventuality, and the truest depths of Doom's power was eventually revealed to the rest of Wakanda. Doom never wanted the throne of Wakanda for himself, and he was happy to leave the kingdom in the hands of the Deserti to do with it whatever they saw fit. Whether they kept a hold of the throne or were subsequently defeated by T'Challa was of no consequence to Doom. He had just enough time to set his true plan into motion. He began exporting vibranium en masse from Wakanda, getting as much as humanly possible out of Wakanda before reinforcements showed up to challenge him and his forces. Within days, he had distributed so much vibranium across the planet that Doom established factories across every corner of the globe, setting them in immediate overdrive to churn out as many weapons made of vibranium as possible before the X-Men could catch up to him and stop his plan. Doom was never after Wakanda, he was after their resources. When T'Challa did eventually secure the throne of Wakanda once again, so much vibranium had been lost that he needed to go to the Fantastic Four in order to understand how to stop Doom. He marshaled forces from across the globe to track down and destroy as many factories of vibranium as he could find. But Doom had been too thorough, and there were simply too many. They were too spread out and too well hidden. Even the King of Wakanda had a difficult time tracking down vibranium. Doom truly made it out with a king's ransom worth of vibranium, and he was hard at work printing an entire army's worth of firepower to use however he saw fit. When they did strike these factories, they found themselves up against vibranium-enhanced Doombots that put up a much more considerable fight than Doom's default drones ever could. But the heroes were able to make steady progress as they charted a full frontal assault on Latveria itself in order to stop Doom, striking him at his home. By this point though, Doom had forged a state-of-the-art vibranium combat suit for himself personally, and had outfitted it with the ability to control all metal like Magneto. This made Doom into something of a hybrid between a vibranium-enhanced Iron Man and an artificial Magneto, each of whom are incredibly difficult threats to face down on their own, but nigh impossible to fight when put together. Doom would call this his Doom War combat suit, which made him nigh unstoppable. But T'Challa had one last trick up his sleeve, a nuclear option only to be used in the most dire of circumstances, and this was it. Once it became clear that Doom could not be stopped or beaten, T'Challa activated a failsafe, one which affected all vibranium on Earth, and effectively nullified it. T'Challa stripped all vibranium on the planet of its strength and power, essentially nuking every scrap of the metal. Not only did this cripple Doom, but it nullified Wakandan's entire armed forces just to stop one man, as he had become that powerful. The Wakandan army was now inert and unable to defend itself, and the once flourishing economy of Wakanda plummeted drastically. Since Wakanda's primary export was the trade of vibranium, and vibranium-enhanced technologies, they were left without a gross domestic product. All of their trade had come to a screeching halt, and Wakanda was in the single most dire economic state that it has ever seen in its history. This all motivated T'Challa to step away from the throne following Doom's defeat, which left the entirety of the nation as a whole, and its image that they presented to the world, a desolate third world country with nothing of value to offer the rest of the planet. And Wakanda fell from grace for a time. He had no title, no vibranium. T'Challa was left with no more powers to his name, all a consequence of Doom and his master planning. Wakanda was left fending for scraps, and this is probably the most dire long-term disaster that Wakanda has ever faced. Many times before they have faced the threat of invasion, they have marched to war, they have lost forces, and even been subjugated by occupying armies. But Wakanda and the Black Panther were always able to eventually beat back these foes, and once they did, Wakanda was able to usually return to a state of relative normalcy, and the recovery process was extremely quick. But not here. With Doom, there was no reconstruction that was going to happen. There was nothing left to rebuild. Doom completely gutted Wakanda of all of their political power and their global influence. He is the single most notorious menace that has attacked all of the nation of Wakanda, and has had the longest lasting ramifications of just about any other invader. And remember, Doom has his own army to rally behind him whenever he needs it. Latveria is certainly no slouch when it comes to militaristic power, but Doom never used his forces to take over Wakanda, just his mind and political influence. This was brilliant, a four-dimensional chess game that Doom played with all of Wakanda's weaknesses in order to find the most brittle impact points, just like vibranium. He removed T'Challa from the equation, sending Wakanda into disarray, and then placed the Deserti in power with all of the ammunition that they could ever need in order to conduct a coup for him, from the inside out. He served up Storm on a silver platter, instilled fear in the people, and created a messiah in the form of the Deserti for the people to rally behind. He didn't want to invade Wakanda, he wanted to trick Wakanda into tearing itself apart internally, and he wholeheartedly succeeded in that sole mission. As we mentioned before though, he didn't want Wakanda. Doom did not want the throne, nor did he necessarily care if they fell. All Doom wanted was access to the vibranium deposits, which immediately made him the single most powerful threat on the planet. This also shows exactly what Doom can do if given the right resources. With just a few trains of vibranium, he became unbeatable to the point where T'Challa had no choice but to nuke all vibranium in existence. So with the power of Wakanda, the Infinity Gauntlet, the Beyonders, or anything else at his back, Doom quickly becomes one of the most brilliant and dangerous individuals in any universe, which is why we are particularly ecstatic to see him make his MCU debut when Avengers Doomsday arrives, and hopefully in the Fantastic Four. But anyway friends, what do you think of the time that Doom tricked Wakanda into collapsing inward on itself? What do you think of Doom's strategic prowess? And would you like to see an adaptation of the Doom War leading into Secret Wars? As always my friends, Hulk smash that subscribe button for more Marvel updates and lore, and have a phenomenal day.